So we're using the Coral Architectural Catalog, and I have the 15.2.5 version running. And I think Brian knows this. We've added a few things since this version, so the next update will have a couple changes. And one of them is the way it counts the joints for CAN systems or systems that use head and sill receptors that or even head and sill cans where the verticals butt up against the head and sill. So that'll be one change. Another change is, let me just show real quick, labor defaults. In the screen where we edit the frame settings, I think we've rearranged, this would be in the elevation though, so let's go to the job. So if I go to the jobs labor and we edit the hours and rates, if we go here, we added a little option to choose how this summary screen is organized so that it can group it by fabrication or it can group it by type, which is frame or entrance, etc. So that's going to be a little bit rearranged in the 0.6 version, so keep that in mind. But for now, what I want to cover is a little bit of the cause and effect of what the labor changes do to a job's, calculated labor. So let's first start with, we went over all these values, the miscellaneous labor rates, the fabrication rates and all that, the times, the entrance stuff, all the miscellaneous. So let's say that with this type of system, we're looking at a screw spline. And remember how we can figure that out. If we're looking at this particular job, I'm using a flush glaze system. And if I want to see what labor setting this type of framing system has for this job, I'm going to edit the system and see right here where it says frame type. So if it tells me it's a screw spline there, then that's what type of labor it's going to be looking for. So now when we go back to our labor, and I go back to here, let's say I already processed the labor, then, screw spline is definitely right. So it tells me here as well. But the only time, if something's screwy going on, then you may have a screw spline system that is actually set for some other labor type. So that's how you can go check and make sure it's set at the right thing. And so if you want to mess with the different fabrication and installation times and rates, let's say that for this screw spline system, you're going to spend more time, there's a little more time with the installation of screwing the joints together as opposed to the fabrication. So 13 minutes is actually kind of high for fabrication of a screw spline, especially, let's say in this case, especially if you're cutting it already, and that's a separate 3-minute charge or allotment. So, if you just need to do a little prep work, then you can reduce this time a lot, maybe. Let's say it's only 5 minutes per joint. But then the installation time is where you have to drill holes and, screw the joints together. So let's say that 20 minutes might be a little high, but let's say it's around 20 minutes. So that's when you're changing the difference between the fabrication joint time and the installation joint time. And that may make a big difference to you if you're really trying to narrow down what your fabrication costs are compared to your installation costs. So, and that plays into the rates, the hourly rates. Let's say you pay your fabrication guys $40 an hour, but you pay your installation guys $50. So in that case, you'd really want to get your different types of labor dialed in, the times for those types of labor. So let's see what we come up with here. And remember, anytime we change this for an elevation, I'm not in the master setting, unfortunately, so it's not going to apply to the next elevation. So if I go to the next elevation, you'll see it changes back to what it was before. So since there's only 2 elevations here, it's easy for me just to go in and say, okay, this is 50. This was 5. and I believe I left that one. And I like to click off of the field that I just changed just to make sure it saves it. Yeah, I left this 20 on both of them. So now we've got the same values for each one. So as soon as we change anything in this setting screen right here, I can click to elevation totals. And I can see right now that my fabrication frame labor is only $62. And this is for the second elevation here. This is just a small 3-panel. What is that? Oh, it's not showing me on the picture, but we'll see in a second here. So that's 62 and 225. And then I can change elevations up here from this screen. So the first elevation was 182.67. And what's that? 658. So you can see how it's breaking it out by fabrication installation. Now, if I went back and started messing with the times again, so if my time per joint of fabrication went back up to 15 minutes or something, and I'm going to change it in the second one as well. So let's say that's 15 minutes. Now we're going to go back to the totals. And for the second elevation, it went from 62 to 142. So you can see the immediate difference there by just editing that value. And then the first elevation went from 182 to 436. So there I adjusted my fabrication labor a great deal just by adding the 10 minutes to the joint time. And you can see with this elevation, it says there's 38 joints, which there are quite a few joints, obviously. And this one's obviously just a 3-panel opening with no horizontals, so there's only 12 joints. And remember, the way it's counting on a normal interrupted head and sill system, it's basically just taking this as 2 joints. The head piece is 2 joints, so that's 2, 4, 6. The sill is 2 joints, and there's 3 pieces of sill, so that's 6 more joints. And so that's how it's doing its simple calculation for that. Now, let's say we want to look at glazing labor. So I've got these 3 bays of glass in the first elevation, quite a few, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 pieces of glass. So if we go into, now remember, glazing labor is, you can only really edit the defaults in this labor defaults window. So it doesn't give you the ability to tweak each individual elevation's glazing labor, let's put it that way. So you'd have to go back to the master kind of glazing table. And the one thing to remember is we were looking at a screw spline system, so we'd want to be manipulating numbers on screw spline glazing. So now we covered this a little bit in the last, and this is 1/4 inch glass here, so we want to know if we're using 1/4 inch, which we are in this system. So so that's what type of glass it's going to be looking for in the glazing rack schedule. So this is our 1/4 inch section here. And these numbers here under number of men, it's more of a reference number than the actual number of men you need. Like, you know, for this size piece of glass, you really don't need 10 men. You might have a crane and 3 men or something, you know. So it's something that it's just a way to reference how much time is required to glaze a certain size piece of glass. So another change that I made, and I mentioned this in the last webinar, one of our, I think it was Chad here in San Diego, mentioned that, you know, shouldn't this be 0 to 50 and then 51 to 100 and then 101 to 139? Since it's not, the way the program's going to handle it is it's going to look for anything from 0 to 50 and then equal to 50, and then it's going to look for something greater than 50 and less than or equal to 100. So it's going to include, I guess what you would say is this higher value. So if there is a united inch piece of glass, it's actually 50 inches, the length plus width. It's going to pick this first row right here. So it would say it needs a half a man, and then it's just going to go over to what type of system. It's going to find the system you're using. In this case, screw spline. Look for that half of man number value and then say, okay, how many minutes are required for that piece of glass? And it's 18. So in this case, so again, it's just a way of referencing different minute values with these man numbers here. So if we go down to here, any piece of glass that is greater than 139 and less than or equal to 159, it says it needs 3 men, which is just a way to reference the number 3 over here, saying that you need 99.6 minutes. So that could mean you do have 3 men, and it takes a total of 33 minutes for all 3 men to glaze that. Or it could be even 2 men, and it takes 2 men, divide that in 2, 45, 50 minutes to glaze it. But you're charging for 2 men, so that's almost a 100-minute charge. And notice how you've got a decimal value. So you can put real numbers in here, not just integers. So you can kind of dial it in, as much as you need to. So let's do that. Let's look. These are our values here. We're going to look at our glazing labor for this job. So let's go back to the jobs labor. And it's screw spline, it's 1/4 inch glass. Actually, let's go to our glass report here just to make sure we're using 1/4 inch. Another way to check on the glass we're using, because I thought we showed the size of or the thickness of the glass in the report. A lot of times the thickness will be in the description, but in this type of glass it's not. So another way to check it is we go to the glass, and I can go to view, and I can say it's all the same in this elevation anyway, so I'm just going to say by elevation. And yeah, it's still not telling us based on that. So I guess it's kind of a good idea to have the thickness in the description. I'm not sure. I think we got this list from a customer and we just kind of passed it on, but we know here by just going to it, it's highlighted the type of glass that it's using also. It's a little tougher when it's all mixed glass in an elevation, but we know it's 1/4 inch glass right here. Let's check the next elevation. Yeah, and it's using the same glass in the next elevation. So we know we've confirmed it's 1/4 inch glass, because this is how the program is going to find the proper section of the rack schedule, is by looking at the glass table and seeing what thickness the glass is that you put in. So okay, so now that we know that, we're going to go back here. We're going to look at our elevations totals, and we're going to say for the first elevation, our glazing labor is 255.50. And then for the second elevation, I'm going to skip over to the second one. It's 174.30. So now if I want to adjust that, let's say that's a little too low for what my guys usually do to glaze, elevations like this. And this is where you guys need to know, have a good test elevation or job that you know exactly how long it took your guys. You build it, you've documented it, you know what it took, and then you can go run the labor, see how it comes out first. If it's too low, like let's just say that it's too low in this case, so we're going to go to our labor defaults. We know we're looking at 1/4 inch glass. We know we're looking at a screw spline system, and I'm going to say, okay, I think there's a couple small. I'm just going to go ahead and raise all the values across the board. So I'm going to say it's 20 minutes for that, 35 minutes for that, 69 minutes for that, 102. So I'm going to make kind of little adjustments everywhere. 135, 167, and then 202. So that's getting up to pretty big pieces of glass, so I'm not going to worry about the higher values. So I've made little adjustments, 2 or 3 minutes here and there. So let's see what that does to our to this job we're looking at. So I'm going to go back to my labor window. I'm going to now I don't know if we have to reapply, since that's coming from the rack schedule. Let's actually try it without. And then I'm going to go back to here. Yeah, I think I do. So it's the same value now still. So we're gonna have to reapply the labor. Or let's just try it process for the heck of it. And then we're going to go back here. Yeah, so all I really had to do is process, because when you're reapplying the labor, that's taking the actual frame labor. So glazing labor, since it's global to the program and not specific to the frame, it you just need to process again. So we processed, and it went from 255.70 to 271.83. And then on the second elevation, it went from 174.30 to 178.50. So a few bucks. Not a big deal. But another thing you can do is, make sure that your glazing rate is correct. Like if you're paying, $38 for your glazers, and oops, let me go back to the first elevation. So again, I'm editing the elevation labor here, so I'm not doing default, so I would have to go into each one if I'm changing it. Or I change the master one down here and I reapply the defaults, and that would do it to the whole job. So now that I did that, I'm going to see an even bigger jump because I changed my hourly rate. So first elevation went from 255 to 295, and the second elevation went from 174 to 193. So you can see right there what the immediate result is of kind of manipulating these values. So we changed our glazing rate, which obviously automatically affects the total dollar amount for glazing labor. But more importantly, we changed the, let me get back here. More importantly, we changed the rack schedule for the thickness of glass and the type of frame it's getting glazed in. So, if you still think that was too low, so that's why I kind of made a couple minute adjustments just so you don't do anything too drastic where it's going to be way over. So I would recommend that, make a few 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most adjustments, and then go back to your labor, process the labor again, or back to your job, process the labor, and see how it turns out. And that's really all you need to do with the rack schedule. The one thing is you're going to have to compare different systems. So, if your shear block glazing labor was coming out right, but your screw spline was low, I mean, they're going to be pretty much the same in those. So, but impact systems, if it was coming out way too low, we'd want to go in and adjust this, way too low. Then you'd say, okay, I need 10 more minutes on that, or this is each one's 10 more minutes. So you can start changing these items. Now the key, I think I mentioned this before, is that you have a value for each. Now this is where this is a little screwy. So notice this one here. Let's go to actually heavy glass or impact glass. So for impact, now notice that I was in 1/4 inch glass. You're never going to use 1/4 inch glass in an impact system. So we don't have a match here to our United Inch list here to the minutes list. And what that means is we've got a 0.5, we've got a 1, 2, but we don't have a 3 in both places. We have a 4, we don't have a 5, so it's missing, it's not matching things up. So there would be a problem if you came up with this size piece of glass. It says it needs a man number of 3, and then it's looking for it over here. What it's going to end up doing is finding the next closest number, so it'd probably pick a 4. And that would throw you off because, it's not that big, because the 4 piece is a bigger piece of glass, or the 4 item is a bigger piece of glass. So anyways, so the key here is the relationship between the number of men in this list matching up to the number of men in this one. So for an impact system, we've got impact glass. In this case, except for the fact that there's no 0.5. So you can tell they're one different. Now, what we've given you the ability to do is, I believe, just change this one over here. So it gives you a warning. So if we check this box, it gives us the warning that says you're about to change things, and if they don't match up, it's not going to work right. Kind of just what I told you. Now, the problem is we're not letting you add. So the one thing, In this case, I need to give, maybe in a future update, I'll give you the ability to adjust this list too. Because what you would really have to do is add an item. So it's never going to look at this rate, because you're never going to get, since there is no 0.5 over here, and I don't believe it lets us change that. Oh yeah, it does. Let's see. What am I thinking here? Oh yeah, so it would let us change this side. It's just not going to let us add one. So I could change this so it's basically all lined up except for the last item. Now you guys shouldn't really be having to worry about this, but I'm going to do it anyway right here. So we go to 12 and then 14. And remember, this isn't necessarily, don't think of this too literally as the actual number of men, as it is just a reference number to find how many minutes are needed. So, okay, so now I've pretty much lined it up better so that I've got smaller pieces of glass covered. So really what's going to happen is this last row right here, the 20 men at 750 minutes, is never going to be used, which is pretty unlikely anyway, so it's fine. So now it would have let me change a value here too. See how I can change this? But if I do that, if something like this happens, it's just going to go to the first number 2 it finds. So it's never going to get to this one that says 79.8 inches, or I mean 79.8 minutes. So we want to make sure these numbers line up, and the only exception is it could either miss the first one or the last one or somewhere in between, but every number over here should have a match over here, and that way it's going to find the correct number of minutes. So a little lesson there, and then we can uncheck that box, and now it shouldn't let me make any changes. Yeah, like I'm clicking here and it's not letting me, so it's kind of locked and saved. So that's something to think about. You have to make sure you're matching the right type of glass to the right system. Now you can have half-inch glass or insulated glass with, screw spline and shear block systems, of course. So these, again, are not completely matched up. So I can go in here, click my little warning box, and make sure that they are. Let's say I need 2 for that, 3 for that, 4. So somewhere I might have messed these up along the way. I'm not sure if everyone's is this way, but knowing how to fix it is kind of the key here, because like I say, these numbers here, I would pay less attention to them actually being the number of men than I would to them being a reference to this list over here. So that is the main key. So yeah, those numbers were a little screwed up on that one. So now that I've got exact matches, it's easy. Once it finds a united piece of glass, or piece of glass with united inches greater than 219 and less than or equal to 239, it's going to know it's a number 6 that has to match up over here, and it's going to be 202 minutes. So I think you guys get the idea. That's pretty much how that works. It's a good idea to uncheck this when you're done editing, just so someone else or you don't accidentally go in and change something you don't want to. So that's kind of that. This is a feature I mentioned before. I need to revisit this before we do our 0.6 update. But in essence, what this was for is coming up with counts. Or cut counts that, not joints, but cuts that correlated to the optimizer. Interesting. And in this case, I didn't like that for some reason. Let's go back here. So let me get back to the first elevation and go to the optimizer. So what that checkbox was for is, a lot of times I'm going to sort, this is going a little bit off track, but it's important here. So I'm going to maximize this so I can see more pieces. I want to sort it by part type. So now here we've got all our head pieces. And And how many part numbers? So there's only one part number for the head. Now the horizontals are a little different. We've got multiple part numbers. We've got a FL203, 206. So we've got 2 part numbers. So if we tell it to figure out our cuts by piece, then basically the labor is going to look in the optimizer and say, okay, how many different pieces are there? Because there's different part numbers, and then total that up for the number of cuts. Whereas these are all horizontals, if we do it by component, it's just going to say there's one horizontal component, and how many cut sizes are there for that. So there is a difference depending on if one component has multiple parts, and that was the point I was trying to make with that. When we go to this little checkbox, that's the idea behind it. Now, the way the program's always done it is the component cut count. So this piece cut count is kind of a new thing, and I was playing with it a little before we started, and it looks like I need to fix a few things with that for the 0.6 update. But that'll be the concept behind that. If you want to literally take it by the number of pieces, which means you've got fillers you're cutting separately, and back members you're cutting separately, then that's fine. But I know some of you guys will clip together all the components and cut them in one shot. So that's basically this component cut count concept. So I'm thinking we should have covered everything. I think you guys know about copying a frame type. We went over that. And if you do have, like this other frame type has nothing set up, it looks like, so we're going to edit that. Maybe it has a few things for entrances, but it doesn't have any values. It's real simple just to go in and I believe I could even change the name of it in this list. Let's do that. And you could name it anything you want, but now I'm blanking. Other frame. Oops. It shouldn't let me type letters in there. That's funny. There we go. So if I change the name, that's no big deal. I can just click off it. And remember, if I click on something and start typing, it gives me that little pencil, and then I want to click to something else so it goes away. That means it's saved it for sure. But if you wanted to go in and edit your, copy one and change it, you just go in and put your values in. If your fabrication's 45, installation's 50, miscellaneous is probably going to be the same as one of the others. So. And then glazing, whatever, if that's the same as one of the others. But then you just basically start filling out all these values. And then remember that curtain wall pressure plate, it will pick that up if it's not a curtain wall system. So it's something that you kind of have to know to leave that blank if you don't want. And remember, if I point to that, it's basically a time per foot calculation. So. And it's lineal foot. Every lineal foot of the elevation gets allotted that number of minutes. So if you want something like that done to a standard storefront system, then you can always put a value in there. But chances are you only need that for pressure plate because it's going to cover every lineal foot. Then only put a value in there when it's a curtain wall system. So perimeter caulking. If you don't want it to calculate the labor for that, you'd obviously leave that 0, and that's obviously a per foot for the perimeter of the elevation. So that's, it's that simple. When you copy a labor type, frame type, then all you have to do is go in and adjust these values. And the main point of today was to kind of show the cause and effect of adjusting things. Like, that gave me another idea here. So let's go back to labor for this job. And you've seen that it's just the two simple elevations, or one's got an entrance. So I'm going to edit this again. Now, you'll notice that our first elevation has the entrance, single door, and there's no fabrication time. So if you're buying a package frame and it's already pre-drilled, it's all set for locks and everything else, hinges, then you wouldn't need any fabrication for that. But if you're using stock lengths, you're buying your stock length jams and header and door head, then you probably would have to put some fabrication time. So it really depends, what type of entrance you're putting in. And of course, if it's a single door with no transom, in this case I wouldn't need that. But if you need 30 minutes of fabrication time and 30 minutes of hardware time, then you can enter that in, and we're going to get the entrance fabrication of $20. So that's not much. Let's see, hardware time, 30, 60, that's an hour. Should be a little, I didn't click out of this one field, so it didn't pick it up. So let's do it now. When I click over here, entrance fabrication labor. That's kind of weird. So fabrication labor is 40. Seems like it should be picking that up under hardware time. Let's try something here. So let me go to that. Let me put a 60 in here. And then, yeah, it picked it up. Let me put a 60 here now. I'm going to click off of it. Ooh, interesting. Single door with transom. That's definitely what we got here, isn't it? Yes. Interesting. So this is something that I have not noticed before. So if I zero this out, this must be a bug that was introduced in 0.5. Well, obviously the way around that is, put the value, like let's see, it shouldn't pick up one with no transom, so let's do that. This should definitely be 0. Entrance fabrication times an hour. Interesting. I think the program's kind of getting confused about with transom and without transom. So, and then now if I put a 60 here, we should see $80. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not good, is it? So I'll take a look at that. I'll make sure that that's fixed in the 0.6 update. Never noticed that or heard about it. So I'm glad we found it. Yeah, because typically your no transom labor would be a little less. Like if I was putting 90 minutes here, let's say, just to stick a number in that's different, where the transom's going to be higher. So it looks like it's still going to ignore that and give me the 2 hours, yeah, for fabrication on this elevation. So that's a good one. Well, okay. So keep in mind, there's a couple little things that are coming that I mentioned in the beginning. I'll look at that little problem for the 0.6 update. But and you saw that if it was something that was throwing you off for this release that you're using, then a way around it is just to boost up your hardware time value, because I could zero these out and put 120 here. And then it's going to figure 2 hours of labor because it was calculating that correctly. So you get the idea. It's there's a cause and effect thing going on, and aside from a problem we found, all you do is you enter a value and it directly translates to the dollar figure. So that's how that works. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them. I think I see one actually.